since heritage, I've become obsessed with materiality, like the actual way that things feel. Like I like tweed, I like herringbone, like I like those fabrics because they have a weight to them and they have not a timelessness, but there's a duration to them, the ability to wear them more than once, the ability that they don't fall apart, that you can keep them. And I think that I can definitely trace that back to heritage. The way that for my project I created a series of axe handles that didn't have the blade on them, they were just the wooden shaft. And originally it was about people in my life and the way that an axe without a blade is unable to function in its most, not primal, but necessary function. You know, it can't cut wood. So that was where I started. But it's become so much more than that, the way that it's branched out, the way that it's become a lot more than just about people in my life. For me,
What else has it come to include?
I struggle a lot with tradition, like just the idea of it, especially because I don't personally really have any cultural, at least cultural or ethnic tradition. Especially just at like where ESA is, there's a lot of people who have either Eastern European or Central European heritage whose parents are immigrants or their parents identify with that culture. And neither of my parents really identify with where their parents came from because they were immigrants. My mom is German and she speaks German, but she doesn't identify necessarily with the German people. So trying to understand what the obsession is amongst people with tradition and with wanting to maintain that kind of identity that is from somewhere other than where you are, why that is. That's really what my art making has come to mean for me. And it's right down to the way that I actually create the artwork. What's something I'm working on right now is my Opa. He passed away before I was born, but I was able to receive a gardening knife that he had used, that he had with him throughout the war and until he died, and my Oma gave it to me. So I decided that I would recreate this kind of starting point of where my heritage comes from and recreate it in wood. But each time that I recreate it, I don't follow the original. I follow the one that I had made just before that, and you can see the differentiation between one object to the next because of the fact that you're no longer referring to where you actually came from, you're referring to where you've been before. And that's been something it's really powerful for me, but it's powerful for me not only thinking about it, but the actual making of it, the ability to express myself in an object. I really like that. I think that's like, it's far superior to having your work shown to other people. It's the act of actually creating it. And a lot of my artwork is stuff that is labor intensive, extremely labor intensive, working with wood, working with metal, working with objects that you can't go back after you've made a stroke. I think that there's something very interesting in that respect. And that series of knives that I made is actually, it's called Waldeinsamkeit, which is a German word, which means, there's no direct translation for it, but it would mean forest loneliness, or the fear of being alone by yourself in a forest. And that relates not only to the idea that without this sense of ethnicity, without a sense of tradition, people feel lost in the place that they are. They feel that Waldeinsamkeit, they feel that loneliness, but also there's an interplay between a very personal identification I have with a certain place in Germany, because my family's from the Black Forest. So the idea of wood and forests is very central to the way that at least I make artwork. I'm trying to think about what else. I also I've been furnishing axe blades, the because before I've been working with just the shaft, I've now started to work with the actual blade itself, which I thought of as being human creativity, which looking back on it, I think is a somewhat immature and simplistic notion of what it actually represents, not only for me, but what people who are interpreting the work that I create, what it will mean for them, hopefully. And once again, that's something where the actual object itself is almost more important than where that object came from is more important than what I'm going to make it into. I have to refurbish them. I'm not working with things that are store-bought, so I'm picking these axe heads up from people who I've been able to get through like Classified and who have actually used them, and they have damage, they have rivets in them that will never be able to be removed no matter how much I sand them. And if I work with it enough, if you were to remove those rivets, you would completely change the shape of the piece itself. So there's a beauty to being able to understand and admit the defections that a certain object has, or a certain person, or what have you, however you want to extend the metaphor. But I think that the work is powerful enough that when you see it, the beauty of something that has been completely polished and refined and is willing to accept the more minute defects that it may have, I think that's more important than any metaphor that you could extend out of the artwork. I think that too often, especially with artist statements, artists try to impose their own ideas on their work when really your artwork, even though it's an expression of you, there is a sort of singularity to what you attempted to make it. Nobody who walks up to an abstract painting thinks that that's the expression of his long-lost grandfather's first photo that he ever saw. They appreciate the artwork for the materiality, the way that it looks, the initial judgment that they have of it. And they might like it when they read the artist statement afterwards, but I think that, at least in the case of making my own artwork, the relationship that somebody who sees it has initially, just with the way that it looks, is important to how I want them to react. I want them to take away something else. I want them to build a superstructure upon the base that I give them, rather than me create a superstructure and try to make it into a base and give it to them. So though I have my own ideas about my artwork, I challenge people to create their own interpretations from it. And I think this is an interesting point as well, that what I've learned in the visual art department has filtered its way into almost all the other disciplines that I'm interested in. So believe it or not, I actually have quite a passion for math. I find logic and philosophy fascinating, and the way that they are related to math and the interplay between the two disciplines. But the learning that I've had directly with visual art it's come into play when I go into other subjects, the way that I approach them, the way that I think about them, the way that I challenge my teacher in those subjects to try and challenge me back. I want them to be able to answer the questions I have. I want them to be able to give me as much as I give them, as hard as I work on an assignment, as hard as I try to get something done on time so that they can mark it. I think that that's an aspect that will always be a part of the way that I view education now, because of how invested I've had a teacher be in my experience in education. Being allowed to do my own thing. Man, I'm allowed to do my own thing so much now that it's like I don't even think of it as being.
And is that a normal experience for a high school student?
No, not at all. Of course not. Why would it be? It's not easy. It's not easy on an institution in the way that, like, you look at the way that an administration is formed within a school and the various pieces of paperwork they have to hand in, the forms they have to get in on time, the stuff they have to do, the attendance, people being at school. These are all things that they go against a certain cognitive metabolic rate that people have. Do you know what I mean? It's pushing against that, and it challenges some people, but I think it definitely deters people, the majority of people, from learning. I'm trying to think, when have we had being able to do what we want? We're always allowed to do what we want.
Well, not in other subjects.
Yeah, that's true, but I'm thinking just specifically about in the visual art department, because I mean that's where we've had similar experiences, I guess, in Jill's class, but even then it's not as open. I think that if a student comes to you and they have an idea for a project that doesn't fit the rubric, and a teacher feels an obligation to try to get them to fit within that rubric, I think that right there, there's a crossroads where you can either engage the student in what they're interested in, or you can kind of try to sway them to this like mediocre understanding of a certain subject. I think that's really the deciding factor for me. If I come to a teacher and I bring them with an idea and then they give me their idea back, I don't like that at all. I don't appreciate that. I don't think that it contributes to me in the future. I think that if you want, at least I know this has been my experience, like take Heritage for example, like my idea that I came with was pretty related to the idea of Heritage, but I know that a lot of people had different experiences where their ideas necessarily, it's not directly related to Heritage, but that didn't stop you from allowing them to do what they want. Do you know what I mean? Help me out here,
I
Lorena.
think being allowed to explore what you want, I mean, for me, it's helped me figure out what I like. And it scares me to think about if I hadn't had this experience, where I would be right now with no sense of, I guess, direction. Oh no, don't turn it over here.
That was so good though. That was so good.
That's the key again.
I can repeat that if you like.
Okay, good.